The Everything Sequel podcast is brought to you by 2T Fitness and the Vegas Beer Guys.
The Everything Sequel podcast contains explicit language, and I will not go to my room. Today, it's The Empire Strikes Back. Michael Shantz here of the How Dare You Awards. Joining me, of course, the man sizing me up with his lightsaber, Tom Stewart of Lonesome Whistle Productions. What do you have for them, Tom?
Laugh it up, fuzzball.
That's your Harrison Ford. You're up there with Mark Hamill.
Oh, thank you. I didn't know which way that was going to go.
That's great.
Well, I realized, I don't know when I realized this. I watch a lot of Harrison Ford films as a matter of course.
Yeah.
I think
I like the story of him finding out about Luke's father and him turning to him at the premiere and saying, "Hey, kid, you didn't fucking tell me about that."
But this is in spite of everything else that makes this a great movie, this is also a great Harrison Ford pointing movie.
Oh yeah.
There's a lot of great point acting, and I realize how much I've incorporated that into my own acting style.
Right.
Like pretty much, you see any show that I'm in, there'll be at least one Harrison Ford point in there.
Nice.
And I try and do my particular take on the Harrison Ford point is the fugitive double point.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
You know, where he does it. If I'm talking to two people on stage, you'll see
think
this. I point at. Well, it's when he's in the police station and being grilled, and he goes, "You find this man," and then he turns to the other side.
Yeah.
Goes, "You find this man."
Oh yeah.
So that's and he does that in here, but he also has the pointing as shushing.
Mm-hmm. Lots of
variation,
shushing a
which I
3PO.
also
If he's not pointing, he's covering his mouth.
This is the other part, and part of the reason why I had that great quotable to start, which is delivered to Chewbacca, is that this movie, like you said it absolutely right. There's so much in these movies that was retrospectively ruined by the prequels.
Yeah.
Whereas one of the reasons I like Solo so much is it fits so well.
Yeah, that's
with
true.
Empire.
That's true.
Like, it actually, I can think of both of them together
and not get pissed.
and not get pissed.
Yeah.
Yeah. And one of those is the relationship between Han and Chewbacca, and the fact that Chewie's kind of laughing at his idiocy, laughing at him getting cock blocked essentially.
Right.
And I just think the way that their relationship starts in Solo, like. It's just it's just convenient. It's just a convenient arrangement rather than a lifelong
Right.
friendship.
Right.
I kind of like it makes moments like that stronger, and I have a few instances of that in here. I mean, I'm weirdly attracted to Solo as a movie in a way that most people are not, but
I know
watching this movie makes me realize why it's my favorite of the non-original trilogy Star Wars films is because it doesn't you can watch it in tandem with the original trilogy movies in a way you can't do with pretty much all of the other prequels. I kind of include Rogue One in there, although I do like that movie.
I like Rogue One more than you, but
Rogue One's pretty egregious in rewriting the history of the original trilogy films, I think. Whereas, and people say Solo is, but I feel like I can keep them both in my head canon without any contradiction. So we'll see. But we're not here to talk about.
We are of course here, ladies
or
and
the
gentlemen,
fugitive, or presumed innocent for that matter.
Rusty Savage.
How did they get away with that name? It's a wrestler name, if ever I heard.
That's amazing. We are, of course, here, ladies and gentlemen, to talk about the 1980 film or sequel, The Empire Strikes Back, directed by Irvin Kershner. Now, this movie has 94% on Rotten Tomatoes. Irvin Kershner. I mean, I don't know, Tom. Do you know?
He is a
Yeah.
professional sequel filmmaker.
There's a Fine Madness. There's a movie called Spies, but I think the movies that
SPIES, I'll have you know.
I think the
Some
movies.
initialization, sir.
There you go. The movie that I think, or rather, the movies I think, the other sequels that people know are Never Say Never Again, Hold for Tom's Applause, and RoboCop 2.
Hold for a golf clap at best. Talking Never Say Never Again here. It's not GoldenEye.
So
And RoboCop 2, which we'll tackle one
at
day.
some point,
But what a fascinating resume.
what a career!
Yeah, and it's sort of interesting. It's sort of if you look over that, you see like Empire Strikes Back, great sequel, RoboCop 2 could go both ways, and then Never Say Never Again, which is not very well regarded.
Yeah, right.
So it's the gamut. He's the gamut of
Yeah,
sequel
exactly.
filmmaking.
He does run the gamut of sequels.
Yeah.
Well, so and this particular sequel, as we've already stated, is sort of revered.
Yeah.
Not just within the franchise itself, but in all of moviedom.
It took a while though, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
I think you're right about that.
I think that it wasn't as popular when it first came out as it has come to be subsequently. At least, I mean, revered.
Correct.
I shouldn't say
Right.
popular because, of course, it was a.
But on a budget of $18 million, an opening weekend of 4.9. That budget, by the way, all George Lucas's own money, so that he could just do whatever the fuck he wanted to do
Fair play.
without interference from the
He's
studio.
a scab.
Right. Smart.
He's a scab, though. Let's.
In the USA, $292.7 million. In the world, $538.3 million.
Mm.
And of course, those tallies just kind of keep going up and up because these movies keep going back into theaters. Even Jaws was in the top 10 again this past weekend
Wow.
because it's back in theaters now on IMAX.
When we're recording this.
As we're recording this, yeah.
Yeah.
Tom is finding the courage to muster on after a death in the family.
Thank you.
Sorry.
That's right. Me old Aunt Liz.
Yeah, the queen is gone. But
now,
again,
since
we're
you-
talking about
since
The
you- no,
Empire
wait,
Strikes Back.
Since you brought up Jaws, I should tell that anecdote. Not to take us on a tangent quite so early, but
Uh-huh.
it's not like because we got nothing to talk about.
Yeah,
this
right.
movie.
Yeah.
That I saw that Jaws was back in theaters,
Mhm.
but it was advertised as being in 3D.
Yeah, I saw
So
that.
I thought Jaws 3D was in
Yeah.
theaters, and I must have been the only person who was excited
Yes.
that was happening, and then disappointed that it was actually just Jaws. And that just shows me just shows the listeners how my mind has been warped by this podcast.
Yeah. I would have been equally excited.
I know.
For a Jaws 3D.
You're the other host of this podcast, so your mind is also warped.
Yeah. All right. So there you have it. I mean, that's the front half of all our important information, all the logistics of this movie.
Mm.
This movie also, I think I mentioned this on our ranking episode. It's got a Special Achievement Award winner for its effects.
Yeah.
Best Sound, it won an Academy Award for, but it was also nominated for Best Art Direction, Best Music.
Yeah.
And,
Wow.
I mean,
It's a high watermark of all those
yeah,
technical aspects of filmmaking.
which is remarkable
Yeah,
to me because
still
it
to this
doesn't
day.
win Best Art Direction or Music. I mean, at least it won Sound.
Yeah.
And when you talk about music,
I mean, what can I say? The Oscars, like the Razzies, don't really understand what filmmaking is.
right?
I mean, sort of. I don't want to offend anyone who takes Oscars the awards seriously, but they don't understand what's really truly great about filmmaking.
Well, I can't completely disagree with that.
And and as you know, a film like this and the reputation, this film is too fun for them to ever.
Yeah, right.
They don't
But-
get fun.
So
They
it gets
think you have
this.
to suffer through a movie for it to be good.
Let me ask you something just right off the bat, because we're talking about these nominations, and one of them's Best Music. And it's not as though John Williams is not revered, because he is.
Yeah.
But is he also... One of my notes is that he's sort of the unsung MVP of this movie and probably the whole series.
I don't disagree with that. I'd say sound. I'd include Ben Burt in that.
Yeah,
as well.
sure.
I think. Maybe we'll talk about that more in the next. I mean, I think Ben Burt's masterstroke is in Return of the Jedi, but yeah, I mean, this is the thing. I don't even think you can. I mean, for the purposes of talking about it, we will. But I don't think you can single out one technical element.
You're right. Yeah.
They fit together like a
Hands in
jigsaw
a glove,
puzzle.
or yeah, right.
And that is, what, and maybe that's why it's so hard to sort of like reward what they've done, because it looks so seamless and effortless all of the time. And that's because every single department is not only working at full capacity, they're also working at full capacity with each other. And this is just unprecedented in like any other fantasy cinema that I can think of. But yeah, absolutely give. And the journey of John Williams through the Star Wars films is really interesting. I mean, I don't know if you know, or the listeners know, but originally this was a classical jukebox soundtrack for Star Wars was envisioned, and they brought John Williams in, and he came up with original compositions that were nonetheless based on famous pieces of classical music. So there's a great deal of Halls the Planets
Right.
in his Star Wars score, like unabashedly ripping it off. Because that was the kind of soundtrack they thought they were going to have, and he's kind of playing to that, but adding his own. But it's fascinating with John Williams. He's written one score in his lifetime, and each movie is just a variation of that score. And that you can use that to detract from him, but you could also use it to praise him, because
Not when
in
you get to
every-
Catch Me If You Can. That's its own thing.
when you hear it, you instantly know it's John Williams. So when you listen to Star Wars, you also hear Superman and Raiders of the Lost Ark,
Right. Yeah.
and vice versa.
Yeah. True.
And he's a real auteur in that sense. So it's a fascinating. He fits into these movies in a fascinating way, I think, given the rest of his career.
Well, and let's talk just sort of right at the top of this movie, because you always love to talk, before credit stuff.
Not in this case.
No?
Yeah, because I was stuck with this low energy Fox logo.
Oh, I forgot that you had to watch
20
that.
seconds of the movie. This is my first note. 20 seconds into the Mooney, I've seen nothing contemporaneous. I've got a retrofitted Fox logo. I've got a retrofitted Lucasfilm logo.
That's terrible.
Yeah.
I got to watch the originals. So
I know.
I got
So
what
Tell me how good it was.
I got what Lucas wanted, which was the extended 20th century, because 20th century had been kind of cutting down its own fanfare logo.
Now they don't even have words.
Now
in
they
their
don't have
logo. That's how much
words.
they've cut it down.
And
over the
Lucas
years.
said, "No, I want the super long, the everything
but
20th
yeah.
century." And it's funny because
I mean, this is
even
the thing
today, when I see 20th Century Fox, I'm expecting and want that, and now I have none of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. What's interesting is, though, I can see and hear that intro from memory.
Yeah,
even though
right.
It is no longer provided to me when I watch this movie for some reason. But what really struck me is also, like, this is the first cinematic Star Wars sequel.
Mm-hmm.
it's difficult to imagine that there was a time where we didn't know all Star Wars films would start
Yeah, right.
with the same music and the same titles. I mean, that's not a given at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Empire could have upset the apple cart.
Well, and the
gone
other
and
thing-
started in any way it wanted to.
Yeah.
And yet, what they do is for at least for the first, minute or so of this movie, you get exactly what you got in Star Wars. So that's quite canny, because
Yeah.
if you're one of those crazy Star Wars fans, that you'll just be like, well, I'm happy with the first 30 seconds because it's Star Wars.
Yeah, right.
Like it's kind of clever.
Yeah, absolutely.
In a way that we take it for granted now because we know every Star Wars, every trilogy, every Skywalker saga, whatever the fuck you call them now, is going to start this way. But that
not
wasn't a
all of them,
given
though.
when
That's
this
why
film
I
came
like
out.
Rogue One. Cold open, its own thing.
Yeah,
Kind of cool.
yeah.
All right, settle down.
Um,
But here, I'll tell you something else that
I have no objections, but tread lightly, counselor.
I'll tell you something else that I found interesting that I don't think I realized was that The Empire Strikes Back was originally the first time you saw Episode 5.
Oh yeah.
Star Wars did not say Episode 4. The studio wouldn't let George Lucas do that. Now they all say it now on these new editions. But
Well, I think we've just found the first flaw in this movie. First and last.
Well, but my question to you was, is there anything more iconic at the beginning of a movie than the Star Wars crawl?
Right. But it's really interesting, I try, it's huge, it's iconic, it's been parodied to death.
Mm-hmm.
But here I was only thinking about it in terms of like sequel conventions.
Mm-hmm.
Which I kind of never really thought about before, because it's performing both exposition and recap.
Yeah. It's
so we
giving
get-
you a little Superman 2
well
in word
sort of-
form, in paragraph form.
It tells you, it sort of tells you about the events from the last film and what's happened since.
Yeah.
And what I realize on this view is a couple of things. First of all, people talk about how different The Empire Strikes Back is from Star Wars, but it's interesting that it begins exactly the same. The rebels are in exactly the same position.
Despite a huge victory.
Yeah, they've won a battle and now they're on the run. That's
Right.
how Star Wars begins.
Right.
Exactly the same. So there's a reset there.
Mm-hmm.
That we're starting with something of a reset. But also, we really need this catch-up session because so much has happened since the end of the last film.
Right.
Darth Vader's become obsessed with Luke Skywalker. There was no hint of that in the last movie. Hoth? Well, this is brand new information. What the fuck is Hoth?
Why did you go to an ice planet?
Well, that's another big question. It's like find somewhere with a more hospitable climate.
Yeah.
Why don't you?
But all of those were all technical choices. Those were all Lucas choices because hiding matte lines in outer space was easy, and he wanted to make it hard.
Yeah.
So I respect it on that level.
No, I mean, I think I've never really, because of course, and again, if you take the origins of the crawl back to what to the original, it was Brian De Palma's idea because he couldn't understand what was going on.
Right.
So when he saw
I
the
know
rough
that
cut of the
story.
movie,
Yeah.
he suggested to Lucas that they start with an opening crawl, and it strikes me that it is just as necessary this time for us to understand what's happened, to remind us of what happened and to fill in the gaps of what's happened. And it sets up the movie so well. Again, like this, just take this for granted, but it's great. Like because the first minute or so of the movie is wordless, and without that opening crawl, you wouldn't know what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
Like the probe landing on Hoth. Like
Out of
with
context, you're right.
A few words of that opening crawl, you know exactly what's happening, and you don't have to have any dialogue. You don't have to have any exposition, any verbal exposition for the next 2 minutes.
Because
Incredible.
otherwise you'd have two guys talking to each other. Release the probe so we can see
Yeah.
if we can find those Alliance assholes.
Which is a potential weakness of Star Wars, I guess, because the opening crawl came afterwards, that they also have that scene at the beginning of Star Wars. It's like, and by this film, you're like, oh, we don't need both of them. Like, now we know we're going to start with an opening crawl. We don't need a verbal equivalent of this
Right.
as well. So it's already beaten the first movie in storytelling. Yeah, and you know, you get a couple of things. You know, they're building signature camera movements, which we'll see again and again throughout the franchise, doing that drop down through space.
Yeah.
To end the crawl and begin the film, that becomes that form. That's been done. That was done in the last movie, but here it's formalized.
Right.
And you get an indication of how the filmmaking ethos of this movie is going to be different from George Lucas's Star Wars, because you see the Star Destroyer, this magnificent shot, model, the effects, everything is working perfectly, but it's not showy. It's not trying to dazzle you.
Not like the
Except
first
through-
movie. Right.
Except through sheer plausibility. You're going, oh, look at these ships in space.
Yeah.
This is really happening. It's not a case of like, wow. It's not trying to wow you, and that's where this film is to me is different. It comes from a different filmmaking ethos of trying to build out the fictional universe rather than exploiting it for spectacle and awe, which Star Wars did, and did brilliantly. I'm not attacking
Right.
that,
I was just
but
going
that
to
is
say.
not what. That is not.
You need that in the first
this
movie,
film
but
is
now
the-
you've established that that's the universe, and so
Yeah.
now you
and it's all,
you can
know,
pan
and-
down and say, here we are.
and you've created this, you know, this fictional world. Let's see more of it. Let's try and piece it together in a way that it feels like an ongoing fictional universe in a way that the first film didn't.
Mm-hmm.
Just magnificent work on all fronts.
No notes.
No. Cut episode 5, and then the rest is keep it. We talked a little bit in the ranking episode about the Light and Magic documentary.
Yeah.
I was struck by the fact that the master shot we have of Hoth,
The Tauntaun
we-
running.
we zoom into to Luke on a single tauntaun,
Yeah.
which is the kind of their kind of version of a snow camel.
Yeah, but they
Um,
talk about how difficult that shot was.
Well, that's it. I mean, the response of the person who had to make that shot was to George Lucas, that's impossible.
Yeah.
And to think about how natural and organic it feels to the scene,
Right.
given that the first response to the person making it was, this is impossible.
Can't do it.
Yeah. You've absolutely run the gamut of you know, you've made a miracle happen and look like it happens every day.
Right. And you spoke to that in our ranking episode about this movie specifically. Well, all the movies, but just how effortless they make it seem.
Yeah.
So something that started
Yeah.
off as being impossible,
Yeah.
and when the
You don't even notice it. I've
yeah,
never
when the
noticed it
product
before.
is finished, it looks seamless and
Yeah.
was of course probable.
Yeah, it doesn't look like it would be difficult to do because it doesn't look difficult on screen.
Yeah.
I mean,
And that's one of my first notes. My first
it's
question
cinematic
for
magic.
you.
I mean, that term's overused, but it is cinematic magic.
Yeah. And one of my first notes was, let's talk effects. The tauntauns, the snow itself, the at-ats, you know.
Well, that's not an effect.
No, yeah, you're right.
That's just Sweden.
Yeah.
Right? It's just. Is it Sweden they went to?
Norway. Yeah,
Norway.
Norway.
That's just Norway.
But what I love about the stories of it was that the blizzards were so terrible that a lot of the stuff, like Luke coming out of the cave, was shot 12 feet away from the hotel
Yeah, yeah.
through a window. And
And,
it's one of those things of like Irvin Kershner, where I just think that, there's a director that just says, let's do this. I can get this done.
Yeah.
With a
kind of
and
immediacy.
just sort of immediacy and
And willing to go
practicality,
outdoors.
and well, not him himself, but willing to send Mark Hamill outdoors.
So maybe he's more like Lucas than we thought.
Yeah.
Yeah, and other behind the scenes information that impacts on these scenes is, of course, this was a way of dealing with the Mark Hamill's facial injuries from his car accident.
Yeah, I've heard both things. I mean, I've heard even Lucas kind of gave play to that we had to at least take that into account. But I've also heard, that he had pretty much recovered from the accident. And his face might have looked just a little bit different, and I think but he wasn't still injured, I don't think.
Well, his injuries are visible before he gets attacked, which is kind of a bit of a problem. In a scene entirely created to make his face look different in Worlds, but his face already looks
right.
I guess the hope the snow would hide it a bit more. Maybe it's the rigors of HD that show us.
Yeah, right. But I also, you know what I remembered, because we were talking about that first shot as he approaches on the Tauntaun, and I don't know if it was a conscious decision, because it doesn't feel, it's a hero revealing moment without sort of like the trumpets and fanfare of hero revealing moment. But I do remember, first of all, I want to say that the first 3 weeks this movie was released, it was only released on 70 millimeter. So there were fewer theaters that it was showing in. Because I remember having to go, it's not in existence anymore, but here in San Diego, there was this...
I don't think it exists anymore.
There was this a one-screen theater where...
Is that Grossmont? No.
No. It was down in Mission Valley.
Okay.
But I remember having to wait online. I remember, the huge theater. I remember going in, and I remember seeing Luke's face and the whole theater just going bananas.
Yeah, sure.
Cheering. And
yeah, but it doesn't put too fine a point on it.
Yeah, right.
That's the genius of this movie. I have the note here. When we get back to the base, we see R2 units, gonk droids, and that robot that looks like a sprinkler.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think about the equivalent scene in Star Wars, it's in the Jawa
Land Cruiser.
Droid repossessing vehicle.
Yeah.
The droid tow truck that they have. And they each of those droids have their own reaction shot.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas here, they're just in the background wandering in and out. That's a huge difference. It's just, we're building a world. We're not drawing attention to anything particularly within that world.
Yeah.
And it's the same with Luke's entrance. The fact that the first Han Solo you hear his voice over the phone.
Right.
Again, a very sequel thing to do. But it's not putting too fine a point on anything. And I think that tonally, that helps build the world. But also tonally, it makes this more interesting. You can sit back and sort of make your own decisions about what's happening and what people are feeling. And I don't think Lucas has that level of subtlety.
Right.
I mean, he shows that in American Graffiti, but he certainly didn't show
Yeah,
that in
right,
Star
yeah.
Wars.
You know what I also found interesting about this movie was, I mean, we're right here at the beginning. We've seen Luke. We hear Han's voice. And the one thing I noticed that it was really, it's like a magic trick to me. And I don't know if it's in the writing, the directing, or if it's just the acting. But, we don't leave Star Wars with a sense of budding relationship at all between Han and Leia.
No, I agree. That is,
and the leap they're able to take.
You will hear that both ways, but I agree with you.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that
you will hear that they were established, that the scenes that establish them as interested in each other. I don't think they are. In fact, I have that as a question. Do you think this starts now, or do you think this is carrying over?
Well, I just think the remarkable thing is that they're able to build so much history.
Yeah.
Of things we haven't seen.
Yeah.
To this moment.
Yeah, well, there's the bounty hunter in Old Mandel.
Yeah.
There's continuing on the fact that, continuing on the Jabba storyline.
Sure.
I mean, that's something we could have reset if we wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
But we're carrying on with that. And then we've got a sort of a mini retcon to deal with because he stayed with the rebels and now he's decided he wants to actually go and pay Jabba back.
Right.
After all, so yeah, it's actually, you know, this is a young sequel, right? This is 1980.
Sure.
There's not a huge amount to go on, and it's establishing a lot of the rules about how you deal with continuing the story.
Right.
How you move on from the previous film, and also how you address the gap in between if you have one.
But it's impressive to me how far along they're able to bring that relationship without ostensibly giving us. I mean, you meant
talking about all the time.
Yeah, exactly. Without
Attack of the Clones. Yeah, no, absolutely. That's the difference, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like just literally, it's literally as simple as Luke saying "Han, old buddy,"
right.
over the intercom.
Mhm.
Like, there's a sense of familiarity that's built into
Of
the
course.
dialogue that tells you these people. We already know they've been through shit together, but this implies they've been through even
more shit.
and they're even more closely bonded than they
Right.
were when we last saw them. And the opening crawl does that as well.
Yeah.
Right. So it's all working together. I love, you know, this is an Aftermath sequel. You know, we've talked
Sure.
about this kind of Rocky 2, the Falcon's being repaired. You know, the damage has been caused because of what happened in Star Wars and beyond.
I always had more the sense of maybe the things that had happened between Star Wars and now.
Yeah,
with the
but
Millennium
I guess it kind
Falcon,
of works
but-
both ways. It's sort of like it gets across to me the idea that the events of the previous film
Has
has impact
had a
on what we're
toll,
seeing
yeah.
now. And we do a really nice kind of reintroduction check-in with
Yes.
with the main cast. Just checks in with everyone's progress. And I think there's a crucial change at this point in the function of a couple of the characters.
Mm-hmm.
C-3PO and R2-D2 for the majority of Star Wars were
Well, it's from their point of view in Star Wars.
they were narrators,
Yeah.
and they were audience surrogates.
Sure.
Whereas here, early on, they're very much established as comic relief.
Mm-hmm.
That's their function in this movie.
Absolutely. But like to a T, perfect for me.
Yeah,
3PO.
the best it's been.
Yeah, 3PO is like the greatest Shakespearean chorus comedic relief.
Yes, yeah, they're clowns. Exactly, they're clowns.
Yeah.
They've gone from the people in Shakespearean plays who are there to give us exposition to the people who are there to be clowns.
Yeah. And
It's
the
like
other
that's-
thing, the other note I had in regards to 3PO and R2D2 specifically was how well I think the dialogue is written to include for the audience what R2D2 is saying without making it sound hammy or making it sound exposition filled. Whenever Luke or 3PO are talking with R2D2, the dialogue is written in a way in which it's perfect so that the audience can understand what R2D2 said if the beeps aren't enough.
Yeah.
In a way, so anyway, it's just one of those notes I had in which
Same with Han and Chewbacca.
yeah.
Yeah, the balance here is just right. And while we're talking about dialogue, I mean, it's very clear the dialogue is a lot tighter than it's been in the previous movie.
Yeah.
And yet it's also a perfect in few to no words they're able to synthesize what we know about the characters.
Mm-hmm.
And there's an offhand exchange between Han and 3PO. He arrives and says, "Can I ask you about X?" And he says, "Why not?" And he walks off, and C-3PO goes, "Impossible, man."
Yes.
And I'm like, that tells you all you need
Yeah.
to know about those two. It reestablishes those two characters, and that's 4 words.
Right.
It does that in 4 words. This movie works best, and it's successful pretty much all the way through with making the choice of having either minimal or no dialogue.
Yep. Agree
It
completely.
makes that choice again and again. It's sort of so, what's the minimal dialogue option? What's the no dialogue option?
Let's
And
go
that
with
is
one of those.
Let's go with one of those.
Yeah.
And that's what's interesting to me. You know, we're like going way. This film has a famous. There's a famous moment of minimal dialogue later on in this movie.
Sure.
I love you, I know. But that is by no means in isolation.
No, yeah,
That's
yeah.
what the rest of the movie is like. You can find exchanges like that in every scene.
Yeah.
They have worked hard to pare down the scripts to minimal or no dialogue, and you lose nothing and you gain everything.
I also
It
like
is a far better movie because of
of that.
choices.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even when you first see 3PO and R2D2 and they're talking, and 3PO turns around and says, "Oh, switch off."
Yeah.
And you imagine in that moment that that's sort of the ultimate robot diss,
Yeah.
or the ultimate robot
That and
retort.
Echuta, whatever that means.
Yeah,
Because he takes real offense at
he
that.
does. How rude. All right. Well, why don't we take a break?
Yeah. sure.
Luke hasn't been attacked yet, but we're
Well,
off.
we talked. Well, I mean, listen. If we were going to recount all instances of Luke being attacked in this movie, it'd take quite a while.
Agreed.
So let's just assume that at any given point we're talking, Luke is being attacked.
All right. Does the coronavirus have you feeling oogie? Have you been sitting on your couch for weeks? Nay, have you been sitting on there for months? Well, it's time for you to get back in shape. Check out 2AT Fitness. You can find them on Instagram. You can find them on Facebook. 2AT Fitness was started by Tina Bernard. She is ready and raring to go to help you get back into the shape you want to get into. They've got all kinds of classes. They've got outdoor in-person classes. They've got online classes if that's what you prefer. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to get back in shape. You're going to find a variety of exercises. You're going to have strength training, cardio, weightlifting, even fun 5-minute burnouts that will push you to your limits. So get off the couch, get into shape. Go ahead and check out 2AT Fitness. Tina Bernard has got you for all your needs. I know her personally. She's fantastic. You're not going to meet a better person to help you become the new you. Check it out. And we're back, ladies and gentlemen. Tom and I are here discussing at least the movie of my youth,
Mine too.
The Empire Strikes Back, directed by Irvin Kershner.
I forgot to mention in our ranking episode that for a long time I never owned Star Wars. So
You just watched Empire and Jedi?
Empire and Jedi on a loop
Why's that?
in another sort of analog bin
Yeah,
phase of my childhood, along with the Star Trek.
along with
movies.
going to the...
Yeah. So this was another example, and we've seen many of this, and I guess it's no surprise why I'm doing this podcast at this stage of my life, of only owning the sequel.
Yeah, there you go.
Rather than the original. So this is another one of those, and maybe that affects my judgment of why I think this is more original than the original.
Interesting. I don't get it.
What do you mean?
I mean, was it not available to you? Did you not care? What's the deal?
I don't know. I mean, none of these decisions were made purposely.
Yeah.
It's just how why did I have Superman 2 to 4 and not Superman? I don't know.
All right.
Availability. I don't know.
Very good, then. I want to talk about a specific moment. I mean, well, first of all, we talked about Luke getting hit over the head
By the Wampa.
by the Wampa. So what we have here is a Wampa.
It's an early indication of what Luke's going to go through in the rest of the movie. He's going to get his ass handed to him again and again and again, right? I know it was there to sort of cover up his injuries, but I think it also serves a function of saying, get used to this.
Tom, we
This
learned.
is the Luke
Tom,
you're going to be
we
seeing for
learned
the
through
rest of the movie.
failure. All right.
Don't give me that pro Yoda stance.
I understand learning through failure.
That is why you fail.
P.S. There's a famous story about me. I tore my rotator cuff playing Pop Warner football. And one of our old coaches loved this guy. His name was Mr. Posa. He was one of those tough old Italian guys. I'm lying in pain, screaming on the ground. He goes, "Shots! Get up! Walk that off. Take a lap around the field." I'm like, "Okay, coach." So I started walking around the field like this, shoulder hanging down.
Oh, dear.
And he walked up to his son, who was also a coach, and said, "That kid's fucked up." We better get him off the field and get him some help. So I think he prescribed to the Yoda.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
At any rate, so like you said, Luke gets a preview of what's going to be happening the whole movie, but we as an audience get to see his some of his newly formed Force powers.
Well, there's a brand new Force power here, right? Which is him using the Force to pick up objects that are in the distance. I don't think we've seen that before, right? This is the first time.
I guess that's true. Yeah, looking back, yeah.
I mean, the lightsaber's familiar to us. It's the
Right.
music we heard during the Obi-Wan Darth Vader duel.
Right.
So there's some familiar sounds and images, but the mythology is new.
And you, of course, I mean, I got it too because I watched both versions, but you get extra Wampa.
I don't want extra Wampa.
Neither do I, but...
This movie is way, way better when we only heard the Wampa. It's like Irvin Kershner built the suspense and the anxiety, and then Lucas shat on it.
You know what my note was, though, too? Although I read in the notes that apparently it's supposed to be two different Wampas, one that hits him and a different one that is in the cave.
Fucking bullshit.
Which is such fucking nonsense. But
why do we need to overcomplicate this?
Apparently one was
different
male and one
Wampas.
was female. And I just...
Is that why Irvin Kershner keeps saying Wampa?
Yeah.
Because a Wampa is different from a Wampa?
I don't know. But I also have a note here that I said, Luke's a bit of a panicker. The place to stay is the cave. Kill that fucking thing. You cut its arm off, now cut its head off. Stay where it's warm, shithead.
But isn't that indicative of this film and how it doesn't mind undercutting the cool of its heroes?
Yeah, true.
Because we get same with Han Solo later when, he says, watch this.
Right.
Turns on the hyperdrive, it doesn't work. It powers, it does that lawnmower failing sound, the great Ben Burt sound. So I think this movie is fine with letting its heroes squirm a little bit and showing them not at their best.
Yeah, all of that's
and
good.
Again, I think it makes it a
better movie for sure. But because you
and
also
it reminds you because Star Wars is Luke's come so far so quickly, and this is slowing down and showing us that he has limitations.
Yeah, right.
And that he doesn't have everything he needs to turn into a Jedi.
But speaking
even by the next
right,
movie.
Yeah. But speaking to
Jabba like giving him shit.
He's like,
Jedi.
who do you think
Fucking
you are?
right.
You think that's gonna work on me?
Hey, Wormy. Yeah, I'm from Tatooine. I know your friends called you Wormy.
But
and I'm Jabba, and I'm calling you.
Speaking
Wormy.
to what you were saying in the last segment, little lines, glimpses of character, because you also in that moment, once Han realizes that Luke's gone, and he says, "I'm leaving," and he's getting shit from God knows who, but he says, that's right, my friend's out in it. He's getting.
I have that line too. It's like making all the character connections from previous film pay off
exactly.
in the story of this film. Like we wouldn't buy that unless we knew their history.
Yeah. But it raises the level of like you were saying before, of their relationship, where not only is Luke his friend, he's willing to put his life on the line to go get his friend. Absolutely. And he'll see John Ratzenberger in hell.
Christian hell. Yeah.
I don't think
one of the few
there's a Ratzenberg sighting,
where
but I don't think it's him in that moment.
One of the few moments where the sort of the interplay between our world and the Star Wars universe kind of breaks down.
Yeah.
I'll see you in. He says, "I'll see you in hell," and then he goes, "Yeah," like he's John Wayne. I mean, it's great. Yeah.
How do you feel about the transitions?
I mean, they're what they are. That's how it's how we edit.
Right.
In the Star Wars franchise, I mean, in retrospect, it looks kind of cheap, but as a moment,
yeah, but doesn't it speak to like the 30s and the serials that these are based on?
Yeah, I mean, just the fact that you can now make those on iMovie kind
Right.
of doesn't help with the legacy of
Uh-huh.
it. But there's a moment later on in this movie where I think they find the much later on, so we won't talk about it now, where I think they find the best use of the wipe dramatically.
Okay.
So we'll talk about that later.
All right.
But I don't have an issue with the wipe.
Okay, because I never
At
did
all.
either, but every once in a while I hear grumblings about stupid Star Wars wipes.
Those are people who don't like fun.
Yeah,
Don't listen to
exactly.
them.
Fuckers. But I do want to talk about this because not that you're not already assured, to me anyway, but there's a moment in this scene in which, Luke's gone, Han has already left, and I keep wanting to...
Yes, let's use both
I know.
pronunciations. Since we have both in this movie.
Exactly. I keep wanting to say Han, and then I realize that most of the time they say Han.
Mhm.
But anyway, within all of this, there's a moment where, to me, I realize how good Irvin Kershner is as a director, and it's when they decide to close the doors.
I have the same
Do
thing.
you? Because you have that push in
Okay.
on Leia, which says everything you need to know about how she feels about both men, frankly.
Yes.
You have Chewie's cry/yell,
Mhm.
and then you have a button. You have a joke from 3PO.
Which he realizes is an inappropriate
Yes.
joke as he's saying it. Then that's why it's funny.
So good.
Yeah, particularly I thought the way that I named him as well. I said the way that Irvin Kershner is able to make Robot and Bear Grief seem as real as the humans.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's what I love about that moment. But everything you said is also true. Obi-Wan,
Obi-Wan. They got him for a day.
big imbas, return of a dead legacy character and actor. It's the sequel convention for
Big
sure.
fat
but-
impasse.
big fat imbas, but I guess looking at it as in light of the other sequels we've seen, it's an early surprise. It's early to pull that, right?
I had never really...
Like purposefully. I think,
Yeah, right.
I don't mean I'm not. That's not pejorative.
No,
I mean,
I
mean,
get it.
It's like that challenges your expectations of when that's gonna come,
Mm-hmm.
if we're ever gonna see him again, because we've only ever heard him before as a ghost.
As a ghost.
Now it's the first time seeing him as a ghost, and it's just like what. And this movie is great at pulling surprise twists out of
Mm-hmm.
nowhere. There's 2 or 3 that are absolutely masterful. There's the famous
Right.
one, and then there's some not so famous ones which are just as
Yeah.
good. And this is one of them for me. Like, Jesus Christ, Alec Guinness, Obi-Wan.
Early.
Basically, all those 3. That's the holy trinity for me. Jesus Christ, Obi-Wan, Alec Guinness.
But Alec Guinness superimposed. He's not going to stand out in the snow.
Right. So there's a couple of things here which really lean into the dirty space of it
Yeah.
all. Wampa dismemberment, and cutting open the tauntaun to make a shelter.
Yeah.
This is like adding to the viscerality of the world that we know.
But again, that's a
gory way?
full Irvin Kershner. It was just, I can't remember what I think it was a true story he read about or something, as somebody that cut open a horse that was dead or something to stay alive.
Well, that's what it feels like, visceral and
Yeah.
raw, less sanitized than Star Wars already. And in addition to this is basically the same note, the back to tank and the medical droid. We get to. It made me want to see a Disney Plus series that was like a hospital drama set in the Star Wars galaxy.
Right.
Because we get like the nitty gritty. We see the nitty gritty of the fictional world, like how you nurse someone back to health.
Yeah.
How you survive in inhospitable conditions when you've got no techno. Well, I suppose you have a lightsaber to help you, but he could have found another way to cut that the tauntaun.
I
open.
also remember, like as a kid, I remember thinking, "Wow, Han fucking goddamn."
Just say whatever comes to mind.
So, having Han with a lightsaber just in his hands, to me,
Yeah, because this doesn't happen.
Yeah,
often,
exactly.
Right? It's just non.
I think it's the only time in the series he's got one.
Now.
Yeah.
It's a bit different. They've gone a bit lightsaber mad.
Yeah.
In recent years, but at least when we were growing up, it wasn't. That was like a big deal for a non-Jedi to hold a lightsaber, who isn't an Imperial officer, handing it to Darth Vader. He was armed only with this.
I know the line.
I know you know the line. So and we get a little bit of C-3PO is fluent in this droid has this what is it called, the Imperial probe droid. They found it, and C-3POs can understand what it's saying. So it's like, it's nice that they're using him based on what he's programmed.
Yeah, for his actual job.
His actual job as a protocol droid. And it's exposition, but it's consistent with his characterization because he begins it by saying, "I'm fluent in 5 minutes."
Yeah.
5 minutes. So it's like he just wants to say
that.
Yeah,
of course.
Like, so it's all, again, it plays into the narrative, but it's organic. And this is where I think up to this point it kind of feels it's not too different from the original Star Wars. And this is where I think we start to diverge.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, just being
narratively.
on Hoth feels, of course, very different because you started a...
Right, but sort of, pace-wise, we're about the same.
Yeah,
At this
right.
point, now we're the first 20 minutes of the movie, and we're preparing for our
war.
first battle.
Yeah.
So we're moving. We know now we're moving faster and differently to the original Star Wars, which is a good hour before anything happens.
Sure.
In that movie. And then we reintroduce the Empire. They get their reintroduction with a homage to the overhead shot of Star Wars. We up the ante. We see the Superstar.
The Superstar,
destroyer,
right.
and you get to see the fleet all together. So it's like upping the ante, but also broadening the ante.
Right.
That metaphor quite works. You know what I mean? And the return of Vader. First time we're seeing Vader since Star Wars. Surviving legacy actor and character.
This movie is the outlier of the original trilogy because it's 20 minutes in before we see Vader. And in the other movies, you're seeing him,
Right
first
away.
5 minutes or minute 1.
Yeah, so that's an inversion. The other big inversion here is that he's now top of the Imperial hierarchy.
Yeah.
Because in Star Wars he was a henchman, effectively, and this is also the trend-setting moment where, this is why we think of Imperial officers as British.
Yeah.
Because prior to this, even though they were the people playing them were British, they were dubbed by Americans, including Harry Shearer from Wayne's World 2. But these are the 3 Imperial officers that we see.
Right.
Here are 3 of the most ubiquitous UK character actors you will ever find.
Is that right?
You turn on an episode, like a 1970s or 80s episode of Doctor Who, you will likely find one of these 3 people.
That's great.
Michael Sheard, who plays Admiral
Ozzel?
has been in Doctor Who 5 times.
How about Piet?
Playing different characters. At least once.
Okay.
So that begins the trope of all Imperial officers are British. And, I've got more to say about that, but it's great. And this is I think there's it's really interesting in terms of hierarchy, because this film makes you think that Vader's, and the prequels, it makes you think Vader's always been at the top
Right. No. Yeah. Right.
of the Empire. But in Star Wars, he's
not. He's the new Palpatine.
New
Or
Imperial. You didn't mean to say Palpatine, did you?
I did not. I just realized.
I let it pass because I kind of liked the idea, even though I knew it was wrong.
Yeah.
If you're talking about Sheev in his pre-Chancellor days, I think you're right. Yes, I did call him Sheev, and I am sorry. But anyway, like he's the Imperial officers frequently talk shit to him. He was under Grand Moff Tarkin, and here they sort of start doing the same thing where Admiral Ozzel is giving him a little bit of shit, like more politely, but he sighs and goes, "My lord," like
Right.
he's like, "You don't get what's going
Yeah.
on." Very, very patronizing, and he's immediately put in his place,
Right.
with a telecom chokehold. And this is where sort of Vader effectively becomes the Emperor's surrogate.
Yeah.
For the rest of the trilogy, it's in sort of
I'm still blanking.
Pulling
What is it? Tarkin? He's taken over for
Grand
Peter
Moff Tarkin.
Cushing. That's all.
Yes.
That's all I was trying to say.
yeah, Tarkin, yes, Grand Moff Tarkin. So that's the beginning of all of that. This starts here, and I think it's brilliant. Another great scene with practically no dialogue between Luke and Han, which is perfectly written, directed, acted,
Agreed.
saying goodbye to each other without really saying anything.
Yeah.
And yet everything is it's clear how they feel about each
Right.
other, how they feel about this moment, but they just can't say it out loud because they're a couple of
Because
guys.
they're a couple of
One of
useless
whom has
men.
a spanner. One of whom has a spanner in his hand, which makes it harder to express emotions. And George Lucas knows all about that,
Oh, that's great.
coming from the world of American Graffiti. It's great that Leia's leading. Leia. We'll
Yeah,
do
we
both.
could do both.
Again, she's leading the pilots,
Yeah.
and it helps because she's the only woman in this movie, the only female character in this movie, apart from the woman who fires the iron cannon.
Mm-hmm.
It's just her. Those are the only two women in this movie.
Yeah.
So it's good that she has a leadership role here.
Right.
It helps, it gets you over the bitter aftertaste of there not really being much for women in this movie. And she's because it's Carrie Fisher, she's a natural leader.
Yeah.
Like, it looks like she's been doing this job forever, and she probably should have been doing it in the last film instead of that guy who looks like Moses. Did you get so the like Star Wars is they based it on World War II dogfights.
Right.
Did you get a sense that they were going more for a sort of World War I feel here, with the trenches and the submarine drama nonsense
I don't know.
in space?
Because I it's not like I don't think of World War II when I see trenches as well.
Oh, okay.
You know. So no, I don't know.
I love it.
I was gonna say I don't care either way because I love it. But
from the dogfight stuff, like it's different enough.
one of my notes was exactly how good a pilot is Luke.
He's a good pilot.
All right.
Like his father.
Well, he keeps getting knocked down.
I understand you've become quite a good pilot yourself, and Obi-Wan's word is his bond. He trusts everything that man says. I have no reason at this point in the movie to disbelieve anything he says.
Well, give it a second.
Yeah, give it a couple of minutes. The Imperial Walkers. This and I think this and the Tauntauns. These are both stop motion.
Yeah.
Models.
But the effects are so good.
But it's like a kind of stop motion verisimilitude unseen before in cinema, and maybe since.
Yeah.
Like, you never question that it's all happening in the same place,
Right.
but you've effectively got plasticine and real people
Yeah.
in the same shot,
Right.
and it does not look like that at all.
Yeah.
It it looks like part of the physical warfare. It's a literal magic trick.
One note I had for you, a question, because it appears that what do they call the mini AT-ATs, the two-leggers?
Yeah,
It appears
yeah, they get a little preview.
it appears that they're added as a joke in this movie.
That's really funny because I have a question for you later on about whether something was intended as a joke.
Oh, that's
And
funny.
it depends on whether it was added in the special edition or was there originally. So you're
Okay.
the man to tell me
Yeah.
that. You think it is? You think it is?
I think it might have been thought of as a joke at the time, and then I think it was George Lucas who thought, no, there's a practical reason for that. That's why we'll use those. So when he got to Jedi, and it's a
Yeah.
more confined space, you can't...
That explains why there's so many of those on Endor. That's interesting. I just assumed it was like that was the first model they made,
Right.
and they just wanted to get it in because it was functional.
Yeah. maybe,
Even though it
maybe.
didn't quite fit with the rest of the walkers, they were just like, "Hey, remember that prototype? Let's just stick that in the background." Because Phil Tippett was just so happy with his work.
Yeah.
He was just like, "I can't not put this on screen." This battle is excellent.
Oh, everything
like a-
about it.
It's like a more focused reworking of the
Trench.
of the dogfight from
Yeah.
the end of the trench run.
Yeah.
With the action far more concentrated, mostly in Luke's craft. Like they used the two pilot
But I'll tell you,
shit.
Lucas...
to kind of do a lot of the, X-wing stuff.
Well, this whole thing's an inversion, isn't it? Because you're doing what would normally come at the end of the movie at the beginning of the movie.
Yeah, I think that's very intentional.
All
yeah.
the action is
This-
at the
but-
front.
I'm going to be a little bit cautious about how many inversions we talk about, because I think there's an idea that this film is like vastly different from Star Wars. I actually think you get everything you get in Star Wars, but delivered in a fresh and different way,
Mhm.
which I think is better than and more different from an inversion. And again, all of it
That's
is
interesting.
is imbibed with this different filmmaking ethos, which is about world building, not spectacle.
Well, and so the other question I had for you, because we talked about in the not at the last series, but when we were talking about Star Trek, we were talking about what we appreciate, and you were talking about character moments and dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
And isn't that what this movie has in spades?
Yeah, it actually does.
You know,
Yeah,
amongst the action, amongst all the action, with
Yeah, and when you
wampas
get
and
to the-
fucking
yeah.
and this attack from the Imperial forces, you still have character moments and great dialogue.
Well, there's a great moment. There's a great piece of. There's a great callback here to the Death Star, which you could imagine being handled in exactly the wrong way in a later Star Wars film or just in a modern franchise film. Where Dak, as they're getting into the ship, Luke's co-pilot Dak says, "I feel like I could take on the Empire by myself," and Luke just says, "I know what you mean."
Yeah.
Now, you can already in that you can say, "Now, how could you get this wrong?"
Right.
You could have Luke saying, "Well, actually, if you remember, I don't know if you remember, but I did."
But I kinda did
I know
that.
what you mean. And it's like it's a callback to an iconic moment from the previous film, but it's not emphasized.
Yeah.
It's just informal. It's conversational. And that's what and again, like, I know what you mean. Five words.
Right.
This is
right.
That's all you need. And
Yeah, but this movie knows that that's all what you need. That's all
Yeah,
that
yeah.
you need. And I
So
mean,
it's
I
not
don't know what
necessarily-
because
we talked in Star Trek about the dialogue craft.
yeah.
Here, I think this is more about discipline.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
paring down the dialogue to what. Not to say that these lines don't play in exactly the same way, just as quotable, just as interesting, just as well written, but it's a different discipline. I think.
What
It's-
I'm
it's
having
about
a
sort of-
hard time
especially given with Lucas's unwieldy dialogue from Star
Mhm.
Wars, which is famously contrived.
Yeah.
This movie. That's the biggest inversion. For me.
right. Yeah,
So-
absolutely. Yeah.
They've literally
It's
gone.
so
"Okay,
grounded."
Let's cut out 95% of that line.
Right. Yeah,
What
yeah,
are we
yeah.
left with? That's the line.
What I'm having a hard time, cuz I think of these movies getting better because Lucas stepped away and Lawrence Kasdan came in. But listening to the commentaries, Lucas did a lot of writing on these two movies.
But this is where the American Graffiti part comes in.
But
for
I'm
me,
having a
because
hard
it's
time
like-
figuring out to what extent.
Yeah.
Are we talking about story or are we talking about dialogue? I don't know.
I don't know either. I mean, the other major, when it comes to dialogue, the other screenwriter that stands out to me is Lee Brackett, writer of The Big Sleep and The Long Goodbye. But again, when you actually look into that, because there's Lee Brackett wrote The Big Sleep, and so automatically in my head canon, all the Han and Leia scenes, all the Han and Leia love scenes are written by her because it shows the same expertise on how to write dialogue.
And didn't she die right around this time? Or
this is the problem, and I believe she's credited because she wrote an earlier draft of this. And as I understand it, it was pure space opera and rooted in 1950s science fiction B movies in a way that they had to write around. So I'm not sure, but in my head I'm going, she wrote The Big Sleep. Yeah. The Han and Leia scenes read really good noir dialogue. Yeah. So I think I have the same struggle there to sort of like, oh, this is so obviously Lee Brackett, but maybe it is someone. Maybe there's someone else.
Interesting.
Actually physically doing it. I don't know. However this meal got cooked.
It tastes good.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't care if it was the sous chef or the guy who washes the dishes who put the garnish on it, but
it could be that rat from Ratatouille.
Yeah. But in my head canon, obviously Lee Brackett and Lawrence Kasdan are the reason why the script is much sharper than ones that are just written by George Lucas. That we saw in the previous film, but it might not break down as easily as that.
Yeah.
And this is a period where George Lucas is capable of way more in terms of screenplay writing than he's closer to American Graffiti than he is to Phantom Menace. Yeah, that has to be remembered.
Yeah, interesting.
Because he wrote American Graffiti, and that's one of the greatest screenplays of all time.
It's a great screenplay, great movie.
Now, not single-handedly, but enough. Yeah, and I mean,
we haven't given any play yet to. I like the running gag in this movie of Vader constantly killing people.
Yes,
love it.
Well, I've like a couple. So you're talking about the telecom chokehold.
Yeah.
Which itself is like up in the ante, isn't it? It's like the last time he did this in person last time. Now he's going to do it via satellite.
At the end of it, I also like the sort of head nod from Piet to get Ozzel the fuck out of there.
Well, I'll say now, I think one of the best aspects of this screenplay is that once Piet is promoted to Admiral, we see the rest of the film through his eyes.
Yeah, right.
And the rest of the movie is a kind of character arc for him. And that's what, most people's biggest disappointments about Return of the Jedi are like the Ewoks. For me, it's that Admiral Piet's story doesn't continue.
Yeah, exactly.
I want to see what the next phase of this, because, they ends on an impasse of Vader's not going to kill him, but he's on Strike 2.
Yes, exactly.
And I wanted to see what's Strike 3. Yeah. Like, what is it? But
Strike 3 is
But they bring the actor back, but there's no sense that they bring the character back.
Right.
But in this movie,
Strike 3 is a plane coming into his window.
It's that's great. That's great directing and great acting to take this minor supporting character and just play up his reactions to what's happening to the point where he has like a subplot.
Exactly. I was just going to say,
a character subplot
in order for the audience,
in this fucking big movie,
in this huge big space opera, the audience starts identifying with this one small subplot. That's great.
And the choice to sort of like have the reaction shot to the Falcon going on him, not Vader.
Yes.
Is possibly the best choice made in this entire movie.
So good.
But also, we're talking about Imperial officers. I've got to mention General Veers.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, let me ask you this: is General Veers the most unqualified success,
right,
of any Imperial officer you've ever seen? He leads an attack successfully. He covers up for his superiors.
Mm-hmm.
Why is this guy a general? Why doesn't this guy get promoted to admiral? He's cool and dispassionate. He's played by Julian Glover.
So you gotta, I mean, automatically I like him right,
I don't understand why this guy is so low down in the ranks. Is what
That's all I'm saying.
Because he's the only Imperial officer who seems vaguely competent
Yeah.
at his job.
He seems like someone Vader would be on board with.
Right.
You're my guy.
Well, but maybe Vader doesn't have that kind of power to promote him.
Yeah. Well, no, he's passing out promotions left and right in this fucking movie.
Yeah, he didn't tell the Emperor about it, though.
No.
He's pulling the Jimmy McGill here. And I love the fact that once we get into the... Well, so they have to evacuate the base on Hoth.
Mm-hmm.
Which means two things. One, we have to we're breaking up the gang. Because literally the snow and the ice divides them. So physically, so they have to go off on separate ships. So we're creating divergent storylines at this point. But I can't. Is there a sequel before this that broke up the ensemble rather than bringing the band back together? I can't think of any.
Oh wow, that's interesting.
Because it makes it instantly different from the original movie. It's such a great shortcut to making your sequel different than your original. Yeah. Because everyone's paired up differently. R2, we split up R2-D2 and
C-3PO, right.
It's like when Laurel and Hardy tried that period where they went off to find different comedy partners and then came back together
because you're Laurel and Hardy.
So, and they fall into, there's the Luke and R2 double act, and then there's the Chewie Han C-3PO triple act. I don't know.
Quad act when you include Leia, yeah.
Yeah. I love this battle. I love the fact that, again, this speaks to we're doing.
Well,
you get everything you got in Star Wars, but delivered differently.
Yeah.
Luke, attaches himself with a wire to one of the Imperial walkers, and then cuts out its guts with a lightsaber. It's like there's still space for the swashbuckling Star Wars heroism.
Exactly.
But it's just not. It's not the main dish.
Mm-hmm.
In the way it was.
But we were speaking in the Star Trek series about continuity, and I love that you get Wedge back.
Yeah, someone who has already been recast in the previous film, but we're sticking with this guy.
Yeah.
So now he's Wedge forever. Well, he's Reg. He's Wedge until Rise of Skywalker.
There you go.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely excellent. That kind of continuity. And then we get a sort of semi-reenactment of Vader's entrance in Star Wars.
Yeah.
Where he comes out of an ice cloud.
It's pretty good.
And then the Falcon escapes from some stormtroopers, except they're in their ice uniforms.
Exactly.
So again,
it's one of my notes.
It's reenactment, but it's in a fresh and different way.
Mm-hmm. And that's just one of the things that this movie has going for it. Let's face it. I tell you what. Well, why don't we take a break and then we'll come back.
I feel like this could be a full part.
It's gonna be. I was literally just gonna say the same thing.
I mean, we're still on Hoth.
There's no way we're not going 4 segments.
We're still on Hoth, Mike. I mean, if not for this, then what?
Yeah, true.
It's not like we're gonna get much. I like to think I know something about beer, but nowadays even I get overwhelmed when confronted by the exhaustive selection of craft beers they have at bars, breweries, and even grocery stores. Back in the day you had 1, maybe 2 craft beers to choose from, and if you were confused, you ordered a Guinness. But in beerstinations like San Diego, the craft beer options lately are in double, sometimes even triple digits. So what's a beer drinker to do? You need what I need, the Vegas Beer Guys. Your beer of choice should be a perfect blend of malt and hops. And so a live show about beer needs that same balance. And the Vegas Beer Guys matches beer expert Dan Aker with self-proclaimed beer novice Stephen J. Weiss. The results are eminently drinkable.
They're on Facebook. They're on Instagram. They'll try new beers. They'll tell you about beers. Think of them as your beer Sherpas guiding you up a foamy-headed mountain to reach the peak of your pint. God, I need a beer.
Michael Shantz here from the Everything Sequel podcast. We're going to be splitting the Empire Strikes Back episode into 2 parts. We thought 2.5 hours was even a bit much for us. So, stay tuned for the next episode when you'll reach the exciting conclusion of 2 men talking about Star Wars. Thank you for listening.